Good evening. Welcome to another podcast. Have a lot to talk about. I'm from Matthew chapter 14, so we're going to go ahead and get it rolling. At that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard of the fame of Jesus and said unto his servants, This is John the Baptist. He is risen from the dead, and therefore mighty works do show forth themselves in him. For Herod had laid hold on John, and bound him, and put him in prison for Herodias' sake, his brother Philip's wife. For John said unto him, It is not lawful for you to have her. And when he would have put him to death, he feared the multitude, because they counted him as a prophet. But when Herod's birthday was kept, the daughter of Herodias danced before them and pleased Herod. Whereupon he promised with an oath to give her whatsoever she would ask. And she, being before instructed of her mother, said, Give me here John Baptist's head in a charger. And the king was sorry, nevertheless, for the oath's sake, and them which sat with him at meat, he commanded it to be given her. And he sent and beheaded John in the prison. And his head was brought in a charger and given to the damsel, and she brought it to her mother. And his disciples came and took up the body and buried it, and went and told Jesus. When Jesus heard of it, he departed there by ship unto a desert place apart, and when the people had heard thereof, they followed him on foot out of the cities. And Jesus went forth and saw a great multitude, and was moved with compassion toward them, and he healed their sick. And when it was evening, his disciples came to him, saying, This is a desert place, and the time is now past. Send the multitude away, that they may go into the villages and buy themselves victuals. But Jesus said unto them, They don't need to depart. Give them something to eat. And they said unto him, We have here but 5 loaves and 2 fish. He said, Bring them here to me. And he commanded the multitude to sit down on the grass, and took the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, and looked up to heaven. He blessed and broke, and gave the loaves to his disciples, and the disciples to the multitude. And they did all eat, and were filled. And they took up of the fragments that remained 12 baskets full. And they that had eaten were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. And straightway Jesus constrained his disciples to get into a ship, and to go before him unto the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up into a mountain apart to pray. And when the evening was come, he was there alone. But the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the 4th watch of the night, Jesus went unto them walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, It is a spirit, and they cried out for fear. But straightway Jesus spoke unto them, saying, Be of good cheer, it is I, don't be afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be you, bid me come unto you on the water. And he said, Come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand, and caught him, and said unto him, O ye of little faith, where did you doubt? And when they were come into the ship, the wind stopped. Then they that were in the ship came and worshipped him, saying, Of a truth you are the Son of God. And when they were gone over, they came into the land of Gennesaret. And when the men of that place had knowledge of him, they sent out into all the country round about, and brought unto him all that were diseased, and besought him that they might only touch the hem of his garment, and as many touched were made perfectly whole. Were made perfectly whole. Okay. Put this over here. Now, what's going on here? That's the $1,000,000 question, which I don't have $1,000,000 to answer. So I guess lesson over. No, I'm not leaving you hanging like that. But it is likely that Herodias hated John the Baptist enough to want his head in a charger. Hatred undealt with leads to murder. And many times when a person has that level of hatred for someone, they cannot be talked out of what they're going to be doing, what they're going to do. There are a couple possible reasons that jumped in my mind. I'm sure there are others, but like the biggest was like jealousy. God was using him in mighty ways. He was, Herod thought that John the Baptist was Jesus because of the work, many of the mighty works that he was doing. But he wasn't. But he still compared him to that. But secondly, preconceived notions. We all have to fight preconceived notions about people we meet. Some would rather believe the assumptions than to do the research. If we are not submitted to Christ, women can use their sexuality to manipulate men to do things we normally wouldn't. This is a whole Herodias' daughter danced before him provocatively. And so sensual and provocative and all that stuff. Like if a man is not submitted to God, it is very easy to fall for that, which is why porn and OnlyFans are so they're so tempting to the extent that they are, because we as human beings are not submitted to God all the time. Ideally, we would be, but we're not. But yeah, and so this is what was going on: is Herodias' daughter danced provocatively, and he was not thinking straight, and so he was like, yeah, I'll give you everything up to half the kingdom. Well, and and so this is why it's important that we're careful with what we promise. The Bible does say Christians keep their promises, even no matter how tight of a bind that puts us in, which is why knowing what we're getting into and knowing what we are promising beforehand is a very important thing. If the Holy Spirit tells us don't, just don't. Because you will be held to your promise. Now, the 5,000 fed. I have seen proof many times in my life of God taking the little we have and making it stretch. Growing up in a Christian family, there were many days, many Sundays where people would come over to mom's for lunch, and she would make lunch, and there was always enough to feed the families that came over and us. The second example is my brother made the observation because because there were times where he was, because he had to drive around a lot for his jobs, even his odd jobs that he did. He did handyman work, whatever to make ends meet, and he noticed that when his car was down to a quarter of a tank, the quarter of a tank lasted longer than the previous 3 quarts. Logically, it doesn't make sense, but if it's logically doesn't make sense, it's God doing a miracle. Um, and recently, I promised like several episodes ago, um, the rough week that I had during that week. Just a sec, get a drink. Was due to financial struggles of my workplace due to not the wisest decisions made, and so but through the whole process, God has you know um God has been amazing because as far as we're still going. They had to declare Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which those people who don't know the difference, Chapter 7 is liquidate all your assets, and then whatever is left is deemed as uncollectible, which means you're not going to see that money. Chapter 11 is you restructure your assets so that way your business can still stay in business, and it's been a long process. It's been tough for every one of us, but just like God has done many, many, many times throughout the course of history and continues to do, God has proven faithful. Um, we are we're currently on our way out, of that. So continue to keep the businesses in your prayers, not just ours, but all businesses that deal with that, because God doesn't want any business to go under, because that's people's livelihoods. That's people's ability to feed their families, their and live enjoyable lifestyles. So you keep all those businesses in your prayers too, because it's never God's plan that any business goes under. But yeah, so yeah, when it doesn't make sense how things worked, it's a miracle from God. Let's see, where am I? Now, a key thing, and when it talked after Christ, no, after John the Baptist was murdered, it doesn't specifically say necessarily that Christ was grieved, but I'm sure he was, because Christ and John the Baptist were pretty close. But anytime that you deal with grief, you have to have your alone time with God. That is a key to dealing with it, because God, I mean, just like everything, God knows how to best do it, in such a way that's going to give you the strength to keep following Him. He always gives us the strength to stay faithful. Let's see. And now another thing as far as finances is when you look back over your finances and wonder how it worked, when you wonder but don't know how it, God did a miracle. The whole concept and practice is, we've got to stay focused on Christ always. We have to learn to step out in faith. with the Peter walking on water, he gets a lot of flack because he was walking on the water and he lost focus, and then and then he and he started to sink. But the key wasn't that he failed. The key was that he did like he did what the other disciples would not even attempt to do. And but the whole thing about stepping out and doing what no other people will attempt to do, is you have to keep your focus on him, because that is how you will that's how you will succeed. You got to trust him and do what he says. And I know that's hard to do because it's difficult to distinguish God's voice from your own voice, from the enemy's voice who's trying to manipulate you to do things certain ways. But if you get a check in your spirit that this isn't the right way, go back to doing the last thing that you knew um, God wanted you to do. Um, let's see. Losing focus causes us to be afraid. It's kind of like the child learning to walk. I love this analogy because being the oldest of nine, I have seen many instances with not just my siblings, but also nieces and nephews learning to walk, and how like they're walking, and and mom or dad's like, "You're doing a good job." You're like, "Yeah, keep it up." And it's like, then they look down at what they're doing and they start dancing like, and then plop. So it's kind of like the mentality of we get full of ourselves and then we fall. But the whole idea is keep your focus on God, which also means looking at things from a like a balanced perspective of, God is doing this work through me, and not me doing it. Now, the wonderful counselor is like when we lose sight of what we're trying to do, of obeying God, doing what He says, and we fall. He asks, "Where did you doubt?" Because He knows, but He wants us to humble ourselves and share with Him um, where we need His guidance, where we need His wisdom, so that way He'll help us to succeed through that. So, what caused you to believe that you couldn't succeed? It takes humility to admit weakness. Now, quality quality is greater than quantity for Christ. He cares more about your character than results. If you build godly character, you will achieve the results. If you are trying to go after the results, you lose both. So that's something to consider. And really, that's about it from here. God bless. You have a great week. Happy Thanksgiving, and remember to be like grateful for what you have. That's the whole idea of Thanksgiving. Well, really, that's the whole idea of life. People who are grateful people are happier people. And so it's never good to take what you have for granted. Um, and when you're grateful, you're less likely to do that. But keep that in mind. You guys have a blessed week, and I'll talk to you next week with another podcast. All right. Bye.